So this rejection of the cult depends, of course, on a caricature of cultic and ritual performance, right? The prophets caricature it as meaningless. They caricature it as unconcerned with ethics or with the ideals of justice and righteousness. But internal cultural conflicts often do involve the caricaturing or the ridiculing of an opponent's beliefs or practices. But for some of the prophets, the rejection of the cult was quite radical. That's an idea that's not yet really fully formed in Amos. We're going to see, again, that some of the prophets will reject the cult of the nation, not just the cult of the wicked, but everyone. Even if performed properly and by righteous persons, there will be one or two prophets who believe the cult has no inherent value or no absolute value for God. In some sense, this is a view that we've already encountered in sources devoted to the cult, even in a source like P, the priestly material. Priestly material is already moving towards the idea or establishing the idea that the cult is an expression of divine favor rather than divine need, right? It doesn't really have an actual value necessarily for God. It doesn't really affect his vitality. It's given to humans as a ritual conduit, as a way to attract and maintain God's presence within the community, or to procure atonement for deeds or impurities that might temporarily separate one for God. And so already in the priestly source we have a very complicated notion of the function of the God for society and humanity. So the prophetic doctrine of the primacy of morality seems to be a reaction against other views of cultic practice. Perhaps there were popular assumptions about the automatic efficacy of the cult and its rites. But Kaufman's been joined by many other scholars who argue that the prophets raised morality to the level of an absolute religious value, and they did so because they saw morality as essentially divine. The essence of God is his moral nature. Moral attributes are the essence of God himself. So Kaufman notes that he who requires justice and righteousness and compassion from human beings is himself just and righteous and compassionate. This is the prophetic view. The moral person can metaphorically be said to share in divinity. This is the kind of apotheosis that you find then in the prophetic writings, not the idea of a transformation into a divine being in life or even after death, but the idea that one strives to be God-like by imitating his moral actions. The idea, again, of imitatio Dei. A third feature of the prophetic writings, and this is again underscored by Kaufman, but also many other scholars, and that is the prophets' view of history, their particular view of history. Their interpretation of the catastrophic events of 722 and 586. It's an interpretation that centers on their elevation of morality, because the prophets insisted that morality was a decisive, if not the decisive factor in the nation's history. Israel's acceptance of God's covenant placed certain religious and moral demands on her. Now, in the Deuteronomistic view that we've talked about, one sin is singled out as being historically decisive for the nation. Other sins are punished, absolutely, but only one is singled out as being historically decisive for the nation, and that's the sin of idolatry, particularly the idolatry of the royal house.